I remember the exact moment Olivia decided to ruin our marriage. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone as if she didn't have a care in the world. I had just arrived home from work, still carrying my luggage. The weariness of the day clung to me, but seeing her there was supposed to be a moment of comfort. Instead, without even looking up, she casually said, "Marcus, I want a divorce." No preamble, no explanation, just those 4 words. At first, I thought I must have misheard her. The words felt so out of place, so cold. Despite the fury bubbling up inside me, I stayed calm and asked, "Excuse me?" She didn't hesitate. "I want a divorce," she repeated, her tone implying that I was too slow to catch on the first time. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Her voice was casual, as if she were commenting on the weather. The blatant insolence in her words stunned me. But what struck me most wasn't the shock. It was the weight of everything we'd been through together. And yet, here she was, arms crossed, exuding an air of indifference. "This isn't the life I signed up for," she added, her words cutting deeper than a blade. "I need someone who works and contributes." I almost laughed at the absurdity. After years of building my career from the ground up, earning a 6-figure salary, and preparing for a future most people couldn't even dream of, she had the audacity to say that. Olivia had never once asked about my job or shown any interest in how I made my money. Yet she assumed I was just scraping by. Leaning against the counter, I watched her. She radiated the confidence of someone utterly convinced she was making the right choice. Finally, I set my bag down and said, "If you want a divorce, Olivia, I won't stop you." For a brief moment, I saw hesitation flicker across her face, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same arrogant smile. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she said, her tone triumphant. Her audacity was almost laughable, but I didn't fight her. "Fair enough," I replied, heading upstairs. As I climbed the stairs, I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for an outburst, for me to plead or argue. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed in our quiet bedroom, letting the weight of the situation sink in. This wasn't about divorce. It was about control. Olivia wanted to paint me as the failure in our relationship, as if that would somehow justify her actions. But I wasn't going to play her game. In the days that followed, her behavior became a textbook example of passive aggression. She nitpicked everything. How I folded the laundry, how I made my coffee, even how I spent my evenings. She mocked my hobbies and routines, as if trying to convince herself and everyone else that leaving me was the only logical choice. And then there was Brian. At first, I didn't think much of the way she kept mentioning his name. Brian said this, or Brian suggested that. He was, after all, a mutual friend. But over time, it became impossible to ignore. She spoke of him with a warmth that twisted my stomach, and the pieces began to fall into place. Olivia started dressing up more for her lunches with Brian, always with some excuse to explain away her behavior. "We're just friends," she'd say, or "You're overanalyzing things." I didn't confront her. What would have been the point? She would have lied, twisted the narrative, and made me out to be paranoid. So I let her think I was blind. The breaking point came one day while I was packing some essentials into a suitcase. Olivia leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a smug look on her face. "Have you figured out where you're going yet?" she asked. I zipped up my bag and replied, "Don't worry about me, Olivia. I'll be fine." She sighed, clearly irritated by my composure. "Good," she said, "because Brian and I are throwing a dinner party here next weekend, and it would be awkward if you were still around." Her gall was almost impressive. I showed her my bag and walked past her, knowing I'd be long gone before their little party. She smirked, thinking she'd won. But Olivia had no idea that if she wanted to burn our marriage to the ground, I was already standing on the ashes, ready to move on. Everything had been reduced to ashes, and I was more than ready to hand her the match. Sometimes, the most profound revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's the silent satisfaction of watching as the flames consume everything they hold dear. Believe me, I was just getting started. Olivia had crafted a glossy new life for herself, but it was beginning to slip apart at the seams. She reached out for a lifeline, desperate to stabilize the crumbling facade. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same woman who had tossed me aside like yesterday's news. I didn't reply to her messages, not out of animosity, but because I didn't recognize her anymore. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. My silence spoke louder than any words could. While Olivia and Brian rushed to stay afloat, I was soaring. Opportunities were pouring in. My investments were thriving, and my life had become calm and purposeful. I didn't need to confront Olivia or Brian. I didn't need to hurl accusations or demand apologies. My success was my response, my happiness the ultimate revenge. The best part? They knew it. They saw it in every ignored message, in every rumor they overheard about my achievements, in every interaction where I exuded confidence while they scrambled to pick up the pieces. I wasn't trying to get even. I had moved beyond that. I had risen above everything quietly, boldly, finishing what their choices had started. Olivia and Brian's downfall wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, relentless collapse. From a distance, I watched it unfold, piecing the story together through whispers from mutual friends and occasional glimpses on social media. At first, they seemed to be thriving. Olivia posted pictures of lavish dinners, exotic vacations, and glamorous outings, clinging desperately to the image of a perfect life. But cracks began to show. The dinners became less frequent, the vacations disappeared, and the whispers grew louder. Friends began noticing subtle changes. Olivia's once flawless hair and impeccable designer outfits were no longer polished. Brian, the flashy showman who never wore the same outfit twice, had started recycling his wardrobe. The whispers turned into direct updates. One day, a mutual friend called me, laughing. "Marcus, you'll love this," she said. "Olivia and Brian are having serious problems. Apparently, they're months overdue on their rent." I was stunned, though not entirely surprised. I had always assumed they owned their house. Turns out, they were renting it all along, and were now on the verge of eviction. The poetic justice was undeniable. Olivia had fought tooth and nail for that house during the divorce, only to realize she couldn't afford it. Another friend told me Brian had lost his job, but was pretending everything was fine, struggling to meet Olivia's constant demands. The woman who once mocked my work ethic now faced mounting expenses and no income. One evening, as I sipped my coffee and sifted through emails, a message from Olivia appeared in my inbox. "Marcus, I really need to speak with you. It's important." I stared at the screen, debating whether to reply. Finally, I did. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Her response came immediately. "Brian and I are going through a tough time. I was wondering if you could loan us a little money to help us get back on our feet." I laughed out loud. The irony was almost too much. This was the same Olivia who had flaunted her new life with Brian, and now she was asking me for help. My reply was brief. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm afraid I can't help. I'm sure you'll figure it out." Her next message came slower, more desperate. "Marcus, please, just this once." I could feel the frustration in her words, but I didn't bother responding. Olivia had chosen her path with Brian. Now it was time to walk it. A week later, I heard they had been formally evicted. They had missed the landlord's final deadline and were forced to move into a shabby apartment on the outskirts of town. Another friend called to share the news. "Marcus, you won't believe this. Their new place is a disaster." I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The consequences of their choices were speaking for themselves. Then came the final blow. One afternoon, I bumped into Olivia at the grocery store. She was pushing a cart filled with store-brand essentials. When she saw me, she froze. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling. I kept my tone neutral. "I hope you're doing well," I said, breaking the silence. She nodded quickly, muttered, "You too," and walked away. As I watched her leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also a pang of pity. Olivia was trapped in the life she had fought so hard to build, a life that had crumbled under the weight of its own lies. Sometimes, karma doesn't need a push. It just takes time. Everything had come full circle. Olivia and Brian's lives had hit rock bottom, and they were desperate, searching for someone to blame or someone to save them. But I wasn't that person anymore. They had underestimated me, betrayed me, and thought they could move on unscathed. In the end, they only proved one thing. The downfall of a house built on lies is inevitable.